And not just Australia, but the various regional partners that have copped flack as well. In fact, the Japanese ambassador Yamagami is joining me for his thoughts in about half an hour from now. But so strong in terms of repudiating the American position, the Pelosi visit, and saying it all started due to their miscalculation.
Well, that was very clear, came across very clearly. I think it's important to ensure that we're starting from the right starting point. The visit, whether Speaker Pelosi should have gone, is a legitimate question, and there's a debate as to whether it was in everybody's interests that Speaker Pelosi went. Once the publicity occurred and the threats occurred, then there was no question the visit had to go ahead, otherwise it would be a back down to coercion. The problem with the ambassador's speech today in this area, one of the issues, consistent though he was with Beijing's position, and that's to be expected. He is Beijing's representative to Australia, and we'd expect the same of our ambassadors around the world. Not that our ambassador in Beijing would have quite the opportunity, but it is important that as the ambassador tried to suggest that Speaker Pelosi's visit was some type of breach of international law or of international rules, well, that's simply not the case. Was it upsetting to China? Yes. But did it breach any bilateral agreement or international rule? No. The suggestion that it was an edging away from the US One China policy is not correct. The US administration was making it clear throughout that it was sticking with the status quo, and in fact Speaker Pelosi made that same point during her visit to Taiwan. The response from Beijing to a speaker's visit was clearly disproportionate, as the government has said. Any military threat or military response to such a visit is clearly unreasonable. Their aim was to try to have the visit cancelled, and once that aim didn't succeed, their aim changed to ensure that, to try to ensure that future visits, whether it be from the US or other countries, would not occur.
Is it also about shifting the balance, the military balance, by saying, well, OK, there might be a crisis, you made the visit, and we're going to shift the status quo in that sense?
Yeah, your conversation with Peter Cleal was exactly right in this area, that Beijing is looking to use this as an excuse to actually change international norms, including how countries deal with Taiwan. And Peter gave you the response of what is our necessary response to ensure that Beijing is not successful in changing the status quo. And that is by working together with other countries to ensure that we all continue our relationships, our different relationships with Taiwan. If there are going to be meetings with Taiwan's representatives, continue with them. If there need to be statements made, as there have been by the G7, by the trilateral security dialogue, Australia, Japan and the US, or even the ASEAN statement, all of those are very necessary to ensure that Beijing's unreasonable response is held to account.
Do you think, given the one China policy of Australia, of the United States, and the view certainly within Beijing that Taiwan is part of the People's Republic of China, that this is inevitable, that at some point it will return, as did Hong Kong?
The question of whether there is going to be a unification and how that unification occurs is an excellent question. I think if there was an easy answer, we'd all be giving it. It's not easy. It's very, very complicated. My view is that Beijing would ideally like to avoid war. They would ideally like to, as you said to Peter, change the views of the rest of the world, deter the rest of the world from engaging with Taiwan through both its military drills, making their real high-intensity military exercises routine, through its economic coercion, drive the rest of the world away from Taiwan so that they can unify without having to use force. The ambassador today used the same words that Beijing has consistently used, that they will use other means if deemed necessary.
And on the Pacific, his comment that they don't plan to build a base And in fact, he broadened it out, saying we don't want to expand our sphere of influence, is the way he put it.
I think you need to judge all countries, not just by their words, but by their actions. And unfortunately for Beijing, there have been a series of commitments made that they have broken. And that results in trust being broken. They have a long way to go, in my view, to meet their international standards and meet international rules and uphold them. As an example, a couple of examples, President Xi told President Obama that there would be no militarising of the South China Sea. Well, that clearly wasn't the case, and it happened. He also said, not just to the United States, but to Australia, that there would be no cyber intrusions. Well, that's clearly not been the case. So the problem that we face is that it is not only wanting to hear the right words, but we have to have, over a long period of time, actions that are not malign and that go towards a productive relationship.
And in the meantime, there is this risk, as Peter Khalil rightly pointed out, of miscalculation. If you've got major live-fire military exercises happening very close, in close proximity to Taiwan's military, there are big risks there.
Absolutely, and what Beijing would be relying upon, Kieran, would be that the United States doesn't want escalation. I think the United States, like Australia and others, have been very calm and calculated in their statements made in response to Beijing's overreaction. I think Beijing's analysis would be that the level of high-intensity military exercises that they are currently undertaking will not result in particular, a US response. I think that is accurate, but as you say, miscalculation is always a worry.
And finally, the Freedom of Information document reported by The Guardian saying Peter Dutton chose you as his captain's call to head up ASPI. Does that change anything as far as you're concerned?
Kieran, I wasn't part of the recruitment process other than I put my hand up as a candidate. As I understand it, I was found suitable, and I do feel very, very proud to be the Executive Director of ASPI. In my view, biased as I am, Australia's best think tank with some great researchers, great analysts, and I'm looking forward to continuing to be the Executive Director of a great think tank.
We look forward to having you back in the studio. Thank you for your analysis. Appreciate it, Justin Bassi.